Welcome back to my Fantasia Toy Box. I'm Professor Toybox. I've got Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey with me, and that means it's time for our next episode of Toy Box Tutorials. We're working on the interior of the Magician's Castle, and for those of you who are new to my channel or this series, I'm teaching you how to use the Disney Infinity 3.0 Toy Box and the different toys that are available. And in order to provide practical examples and create something meaningful, I'm building a Fantasia toy box as we go along, so each lesson builds on the previous ones. So if you're new to the toy box and you're watching this and you feel kind of lost, I recommend going back and starting with the first episode. That'll get you going in the right direction. And then if you follow along with me through all of the lessons and build this on your own console or PC, then when we're all finished, you'll have a brand new toy box that you can play through and enjoy, filled with working examples of many of the different toys. Today I'm going to build the next puzzle, and I'm going to build it in this courtyard. And I'm going to build the entire puzzle because there isn't a good way to break this up into smaller episodes, so this video will be longer than some of my other lessons. I apologize for that, but I hope you'll stick with me. This will be pretty cool when it's done. The goal of this puzzle is going to be to break a protective spell that is blocking the entrance to the main house over here. And to do that, to put up the barrier, I'm going to use this Dunbrock stone gate. And I'm going to place this right in front of that entrance, just like that. This is from the Brave Forest Siege game from 2.0, and when you try to walk through it, it prevents you. It's kind of a magical barrier. However, it does stand out away from the wall a little bit, and Mickey can slip in behind it, so I don't want the player doing that. And so we're going to put up a couple of scalable barrier blocks here that will prevent the player from scooting around behind this thing. And I'll drop the first one right over here like this, and the second one we'll put right over here like that. And we'll adjust the dimensions of this thing so it's a little bit better. And now the player won't be able to get through there. So that's good. Now, to open this gate, Mickey will need to interact with a series of color pressure plates, and that's our topic for today's lesson, and you'll find these under the Gameplay Toys drawer. And there are actually two of them. There's this one from the Brave Forest Siege game, and right next door there's one from Escape the Kiln. So if you want a more futuristic kind of look, you can use that. Both of these, of course, are 2.0 games, and you can unlock these toys by placing the game piece from 2.0 on the Disney Infinity base in 3.0. And I'm going to put down one directly across from the door. And I'm going to need 5 of these. So I'll put them down like that, and I'll throw a 6th one over here just so that we can kind of play around with it. Okay, so let me come out of spark mode here. And if you've seen this toy, when you step on it, it changes color. And if you jump on it, it's the same as stepping on it. So there's blue, there's orange, green, purple, and red, essentially. And that's the order of the colors and the symbols that appear. And if you jump again, it repeats around to the blue. And that sequence is fixed. There's no way to alter that. But under the properties, there's some things that we can tweak. So let's look at that next. So under the logic menu, if we come down to properties, there are 5 of them. First is the number of colors. So if you don't want all 5 colors, you can reduce this to 4, 3, 2, or even just 1. And reducing this from 5 to 4 will take the last color off in the sequence, which is red. Reducing it to 3 will take red and purple off, which are the last 2 colors in the sequence, and so on. There's also this toggle here for random sequence, so if we turn that on, that's the only way to alter the sequence of colors. So if you don't want it to be too predictable, there's the yellow, there's blue. It should have gone to green before, now it's green, and red, stays red, stays red, stays red. So it's kind of random and it can repeat. And so it's a little less predictable that way. So if you want that, you'd flip that flag on. Also under the properties, there's this affected type. And right now by default it's set to all. So any Disney Infinity figure, any enemy, townsperson, sidekick, vehicles, mounts, floating vehicles, flying vehicles. Floating vehicles be like the hoverboards. Certain characters, if you only want certain characters to be able to interact with this, you can set that up. And basically it's set to all, so any character or any vehicle or anything that touches this plate will change it. And so if you don't want that, you can tweak that. I'm going to leave this set to all for right now. There's a match team on contact setting, and what this does, let me turn this on. If we come back out of here and out of Spark mode into the editor, I'm going to come up and drop down a couple of team activators over here. And so if we run over and step on, for example, the blue activator, and now Mickey's on the blue team, and we come and step on the plate, it changes to blue. And running over top of it isn't going to change it to anything other than blue, because it's responding to the team that I'm on. And if I come over and step on the orange team activator, then come over here, now it changes it to orange, which actually looks a little more yellow to me, but they call it orange. So anyway, you can use that property to your advantage if you want to set up a little game with a bunch of these scattered around and have a challenge set up where each player has to change the color of as many of these to their team color as possible. So that could be kind of cool. And the last one includes this flag. If you turn this on, it includes the offsetting, like you see on those at the top of the screen. By default, as soon as you step on it, you get the colors and you'll never get the offsetting back, the cleared setting, but if you turn that on, you would. And so now, of course, if we come back out here, and now it's in the sequence, so it'll go green, purple, red, clear. And so that adds a sixth variant, I guess, to the puzzle. Now, as far as logic connections go, let's drop a button out here real quick that I can use just to show what you can do with this. So on this button, I'll just do a new logic connection when pressed, and we'll come over and look at all the things you can direct this toy to do. So first of all, you can direct it to turn off, which will basically reset it to the cleared state, like you see the 4 or 5 of them at the top of the screen there. You can set it to be a specific color, so pushing a button or running through a trigger area or some other behavior can set this to be whatever color you want. And you can also set it to be a random color. So you don't have to necessarily step on this color pressure plate to set the color. You can have other toys set it as well. And then under this toy, if we look at the logic connection menu, there's a number of logic connections you can establish, trigger signals that this toy will broadcast. The first is stepped on. So this, of course, is when it's stepped on by a character or a sidekick or enemy or townsperson or whatever. The next one is color changed, and this kind of seems redundant with this one, except that color changed will respond not only when a character steps on this, but also when you change the color via a logic connection, like a button. And so that's the difference between these. Stepped on will only only broadcast when a character actually physically steps on this. Logic connections will not trigger that signal. And so that's why we have 2 different signals. And if you're not using a logic connection, these are kind of redundant, but that's the difference between them. Whenever this toy changes to a specific color, it'll broadcast one of these. So as soon as it changes to blue, it'll broadcast the trigger signal for turned blue. And same with orange, green, purple, and red, and clear. So when you clear it, it either will be a logic connection or you turn that property on that allows the cleared state to be in the rotation. Then this trigger signal will broadcast when that's set. So that's the color pressure plate. And go ahead and delete that and that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 5 of these color pressure plates, and I'm going to build a simple combination lock for the stone gate over at the door there that's blocking the entrance to the main house. And to do that, we're going to need a few extra toys here. So I'm going to scroll left in the Creativitoys drawer and drop a few things down. And I could have dropped these earlier, but I kind of wanted to put the color pressure plates down first. And so I'm going to put down a logic gate, one for each of these color pressure plates. And then I'm also going to put down a time delayer. And I'll get to that in a minute. And so what's going to happen here is that I'm going to use the logic gates as kind of the tumblers for the lock. And so each of these pressure plates is going to open or close its corresponding logic gate. And if you need a refresher on the logic gate, you can go back and watch episode 11. But for this first gate, I'm going to set this one to be green. So green is going to be the color that will unlock this gate. And so on this pressure plate, I'm going to leave all of the properties set to default on all 5 of these. So all 5 colors, random sequence is off. Anything can change them. I'll leave that set to off, and I don't need the off setting, so that's fine. So all of those properties are set by default. And I'm going to set up a new logic connection. So when this color pressure plate turns green, we'll come over to this logic gate and open it. And because the property for the random sequence is not turned on, the sequence is fixed. And so the sequence, as you recall, goes blue, orange, green, purple, and red. And so the next sequence after green would be purple. And so when this turns purple, I'm going to come back over here and close this gate. And if I were using the random sequence, I'd have to hook up the trigger signals for all the other colors to make sure they close that gate. Oh, and by the way, we want to make sure the level starter turns these off by default and closes all of the gates. So on the level starter, on catalyze, I want to come over to each logic gate and close it. So all of these gates will be closed when the player first enters the toy box. And that kind of goes along with the cleared state for each of the color pressure plates. So I'll close that one, because I don't want any of these to be open until the player sets the correct color on the pressure plate. And that one closed, and 2 more. You can fast forward a few seconds if you don't want to watch me setting all of these. But for those of you who are still kind of new to the toy box, I don't want to skip any steps in the toy box tutorial series if I can help it, because I know this is helpful to you to actually see me do all of these things versus just telling you to do it. And the last gate will close it. Okay, so the toy box level starter, when you first enter the toy box, will close all of these gates. And by default, all of these are set to the cleared state. So we've hooked up the first plate here, and changing this to green will open that gate. Changing it to purple will close it again. And so the player can't just jump up and down on top of this thing until the gate's open. If they jump up and down too many times, it'll close the gate back up again. Now for the second color pressure plate, we're going to set this one to be purple. And so when it changes purple, we'll come over and open the logic gate. And the next color after purple is red. So when it's turned red, we'll come over and close that gate again. For the third one, I want this one to be blue. So when it's turned blue, we'll open up this gate. And the next one in the sequence is orange. When it turns orange, we'll go ahead and close the gate again. this one we'll set it to red. So new logic connection. When turned red, we'll come over and open the gate. And the way the default properties are set, the next one in the sequence would be blue. So when it turns blue, we'll come back and close the gate. And for the last one, we'll set this to be green again, because there's no reason we can't have duplicates in the combination. So once again, when it turns green, we'll open that gate. And when it turns purple, we'll close it. And so all 5 of these gates will only all be open at the same time once every one of these plates is set to the proper color, the one that I've specified. And if the player does that, then a signal can go through all 5 of those gates. And my plan is to run a signal through all of these gates, and even if even one of them is closed, then the signal won't get through. And so again, in order to make sure they're all open, Mickey has to set the right color on each corresponding color pressure plate. And when all 5 plates are set to the correct color, then all 5 gates will be open and the signal can get through. Now, to run a signal through all of these gates, I could use a button, and I could hook a button up to do that. But it would be a little tedious to make the player change each of the gates and then run over and hit the button to see if they got it right, and then run back if they didn't. So it'd be kind of nice if it did that automatically when the last pressure plate was set correctly. And so to do that, I'm going to use a time delayer. And so on this time delayer, I drop down. We'll get back to that now. So under the properties, I'm going to set the delay time to the shortest delay time I can, which is 0.25 seconds. And I'm going to run this through so that when the delay is completed, we'll go into the first logic gate and try to do an input. And on this gate, new logic connection on output, come to the next gate and do an input. And on this one, new logic connection on output from the gate, we'll input into the next one. And so we're going to run a signal through all of these gates in series. On output, go into the next gate. And on this one, new logic connection on output, input into this gate. And so this final logic gate here will only output if all 5 of those gates are open. And so all of them have to be open for this signal to get through this gate. And so that's how we're setting up our combination lock. Now, what I'm going to do with this for right now is we can take this gate and new logic connection on output. I could hook this up directly to the stone gate over here and have it open that gate. And we'll do that initially, but that's not what I want to do ultimately. But that's the simplest solution for right now. That's what we're ultimately trying to do. And now to invoke that time delayer, what I'm going to do is come to each of these pressure plates and we'll do a new logic connection. When the color is changed, we'll come over to the time delayer and start the delay. So when Mickey steps on this color plate and changes the color, it's going to go to the time delayer, which will go off a quarter second later and try to run a signal through all of these gates. And if the gates aren't all open, the signal won't go through. And so we'll do that on each of these because I don't know the order necessarily that the player is going to set all of these. And the third one, new logic connection when the color is changed. Come over here. Because the other thing is the player could have a sidekick, there could be some enemies running around, and I think it's kind of good to have them potentially frustrate the player a little bit if they're still around and stepping on these things behind the player. Kind of forces the player to deal with all the enemies first. Alright, so it doesn't matter which is the last plate the player interacts with. Whenever they change one of these plates, it'll invoke the time delayer, which will turn around and try to run the signal through all of these. And if it can get through all of these, then it'll come over and open the gate. And I'm going to have to test this a couple of different times. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up, I could hook up the level starter to those pressure plates to reset them again, and to that gate. But I don't really need the level starter to do that, so I'm going to use the button that's connected to the level starter, because this button will eventually go away when we're all done. So when pressed, I want to come over to each of the gates and put these back into their initial state, which is the off state, like you see them now. New logic connection when pressed. Come over to the second one. Again, we'll do this for all of these. And I want to do this before I test this, just so I make sure I have a way to put it back without having to play it and then go change all of these. Because we're at kind of a good pause point for the moment here where it's easy enough to do this. Because then once we test this, there's a couple of tweaks I want to make, which will make it a little bit better. And one more to go. And then the last thing I want to do is reset that stone gate. So new logic connection when pressed. We'll come back over to the stone gate and close it. And right now, the logic gates are all in the open state. And so I'm going to come over here and push this button just to make sure those are closed. And of course, that's going to kick off the broom generation. So I need to come over here and stop that. There we go. Okay. Oh, I'm still on the orange team. Let's come over here and take care of that too. And then I can remove those team activators because I don't really need those. There we go. Ooh, and I got free sparks. I don't want to miss those. I already missed the blue ones. I want to get Mickey leveled up here. Okay, so we've got everything hooked up. So let's go ahead and see if we can open up that door. So the first plate I said I was going to set to green. So we're going to come over here. There's blue, yellow, green. So that gate should be open. Second one was purple. Yellow, green, purple. The next one was blue. Only had to touch that once. Next is red. And every time I'm changing the color, it's invoking that time delayer and trying to invoke the signal through the logic gates. And you can see that gate is still closed. But now we're coming up to the last gate, and I had set this one to green. So there's blue, yellow, and green. And now you can see that the stone gate is open. And Mickey can run on into the interior of the house. So that's the combination lock. And let's go up and reset. So once again, I'll come up here and push this button because there's, again, a few tweaks I want to make to this. So that resets all of the gates, and that should have closed the stone gate over there too. There it is. That's strange. Okay, and let's get rid of these brooms. Okay. So that's the basic puzzle, and it works pretty well. But I want to incorporate this stone circle into the puzzle somehow, because it's a significant feature in this courtyard and it looks kind of cool. So instead of hooking up the final logic gate directly to this Dunbrock stone gate, I'm going to do something a little different. So I'm going to come back to this final logic gate, and I'm going to delete this link to the stone gate. And we're going to have this do something different here. And so what I want to do is, let me come out of Spark mode, down into the Gameplay Toys drawer, and I'm going to go to the right, and I'm looking for the Crystal Shard Collectible, which is right there. And we're going to drop this right in the middle of the stone circle, just like, not quite like that, got to go up a little higher. There we go. And I've already dropped a locator underneath it, which is also in the center of the circle. And to save a little time, I've got another time delayer over here and 2 effect generators. And so what I want to have happen is when the signal comes out of this final logic gate and the combination has been set, I want this crystal collectible to kind of show up in a flash of magic light. And when the player runs over here and picks this up, then the stone gate will open. And so that's my goal. So we'll come over here to the level starter, first of all, and do a new logic connection on Catalyze. I want to come over to this Crystal Shard Collectible, and I want to hide it, because I don't want it to be visible or interacted with until I'm ready. So that will remove that. And then each of these effect generators we're going to hook up to that locator underneath the stone circle. So there's one. Oh, not a new logic connection, new locator connection. And we'll hook that up to that same locator. So we're going to run a couple of special effects there. And then on this time delayer, the 1 second delay under the properties, which is the default, is fine. And so we'll come over to this gate and we'll do a new logic connection on output. And instead of going directly to the stone gate, we're going to come over to this first effect generator, and I'm going to play a special effect. So we're going to do 1 time under flashes. We're going to play the teleportation cone. So it's like the crystal shard is beaming in. And then we'll come back to the logic gate, and on output, I'm going to come over to the time delayer, because 1 second later I want to have another effect play and make that crystal shard appear. And so on the time delayer then, we'll do a new logic connection on delay completed, come over to our second effects generator, and we're going to play 1 time, this time out of the electric effects drawer, and I'm going to play the radial energy impact. And the other thing the time delayer will do, new logic connection when the delay is completed, come over to the collectible. Oops, where are we? There it is. And we'll reset it, which will make it visible. And then the collectible, do a new logic connection when it's broken or collected, come over to the stone gate and open it. And so that's what I want it to do. And so now let's go ahead and hit the button 1 more time, which will hide the collectible. And you can see that collectible is not there. And we'll once again remove the enemies. Oops, not that way. Got turned around. Okay. So those color plates are reset. The gate is open. The collectible is not there. So the player will come over here. Again, this first gate is set to green. Second gate is set to purple. Third gate is set to blue. Fourth gate is set to red. And the last gate is set to green. And there's our effect. And now the crystal shard shows up. And that looked pretty cool. And now when we pick that up, the spell is broken. So that's an example of what you can do with a color pressure plate. But you might be wondering, how is the player supposed to know the correct combination? Well, starting next week, we're going to build another puzzle that, when it's solved, will reveal the combination. Meanwhile, I hope you've enjoyed this video, or at least found it helpful. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to sign up on my blog or subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next episode in this series. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.